Breaking news! Things are hot behind the scenes for the Miami Dolphins, and I have some important things to talk about here. The news that's dominating the conversation among Dolphins fans is the possible Jaylen Ramsay trade. And it's not a rumor. Respected sources like Barry Jackson and Adam Schefter have confirmed that there's more interest in Ramsay around the league than the public thinks. Mike McDaniel is going to need a quality roster. Greer should have been fired by now, but unfortunately he hasn't yet. Man, I'm going to give you the lowdown on what's going on. But before I get to work, I'm going to make sure you've already hit the like button if you've been a Miami Dolphins fan for over 20 years. It's great to see fans of all ages. If possible, comment something like, "My heart will always be Dolphins." This trade could be announced in June, although the deal could be done as early as May. Why wait? Simple, limit. If Miami were to make the trade official before June 1st, the impact on the salary cap would be devastating, jumping to $29.2 million for a net loss of $12.5 million. Waiting until June means saving millions and having more freedom to bolster the roster. And the return? Until recently, the expectation was a modest fifth-round pick for 2026. But with the market heating up, there's a real chance of getting a conditional fourth-round pick, and depending on performance and goals like the Pro Bowl or playoffs, that pick could even become a third-round pick. The main interested party seems to be the old acquaintance Los Angeles Rams, where Ramsay has already shown. The Eagles, Lions, Raiders, and even the Bills are conceptual names, but trading with the division rival would be unthinkable without an absolutely irresistible return. Now, the big question that remains in the air is, what will Miami do after the trade? The Dolphins cornerback group is already considered one of the 10 worst in the NFL. Without Ramsay, things are close to catastrophic. Players like Cam Smith, Storm Duck, Ethan Bonner, Jason Marshall Jr. and Kader Kohou simply can't carry this area. The solution? The free agent market is strong, and with the potential savings after Ramsay's trade, Miami could open up $23.7 million in cap space, more than enough to bring in 2 or 3 big names. One of those targets has already visited Dolphins HQ, Rasul Douglas. The veteran former Packers and Bills player had a pretty poor season in 2024, especially in man-to-man coverage, but he's still considered one of the best names available, which shows how thin the market is. Douglas had a 124.1 rating when he was targeted, simply unacceptable. But since the Dolphins play predominantly zone, about 68%, he might be a better fit here. The problem? He didn't sign. That suggests he either didn't like the offer or wants to test the market. He has already visited the Seahawks and may be waiting for a better offer. But if not Douglas, who else? Names like Stephon Gilmore, Mike Hilton, James Bradbury, Shaquille Griffin, and Asante Samuel Jr. And it is precisely about Samuel Jr. that we have a hot update. The corner, former Chargers, underwent neck surgery in April and is expected to recover with some time until July, after a medical reevaluation. The upside is huge, and that is why it is worth the risk. With him, the Dolphins could have a group formed by Douglas, Samuel Jr., Cam Smith, and Kader Kohou, still far from ideal, but much better than the current scenario without reinforcements. Because this conversation is far from over. Let's dive deeper into the post-Ramsay world that Miami is preparing for, one that could define the success or failure of the Dolphins' 2025 campaign. The reality is harsh. Once the trade is finalized, whether it's to the Rams, Lions, or another suitor, the Dolphins' secondary becomes a glaring vulnerability. And the front office, yes, still led by Chris Greer, somehow needs to act decisively to avoid a defensive meltdown that could sabotage a playoff run before it even starts. We talked about Rasul Douglas and Asante Samuel Jr. as potential patchwork solutions, but let's be real, both come with significant risks. Douglas has become a liability in man coverage, and Samuel Jr. is recovering from neck surgery. That's not exactly the kind of duo you trust to lock down Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs twice a year. And remember, this is all under the assumption that Cam Smith suddenly becomes the player Miami hoped he would be when they drafted him in the second round. But so far, crickets. No breakout, no flashes, nothing. You can't build a Super Bowl caliber defense on hope. So what's the strategy here? One possibility is that Miami front loads the defense with experience, maybe adding not just Douglas and Samuel Jr., but also a name like Stephon Gilmore or Shaquille Griffin. Gilmore, even at this stage of his career, brings leadership and proven ability, especially in zone-heavy schemes. Pair him with a healthier Samuel Jr., and you at least create a structure where younger players like Jason Marshall Jr. and Storm Duck can develop behind seasoned vets instead of being thrown to the wolves. But here's the underlying issue, and this is where fans should really start asking questions. Why are we here in the first place? Why are the Dolphins, supposedly entering their championship window, scrambling to fix the cornerback room in mid-May. It's mismanagement, plain and simple. The departure of Xavier Howard and now Ramsay leaves a hole that everyone could see coming. And yet, Greer didn't make the necessary moves in the draft or early free agency. He bet on Cam Smith. He bet on the idea that a once elite, now aging Ramsay would miraculously find peace in Miami. Those bets are blowing up in real time. This brings us to another critical point, the cap space. With Ramsay off the books post June 1st, Miami could have around $23.7 million to work with. That kind of flexibility is rare and valuable, especially this late in the offseason. But the Dolphins have to use it wisely. This isn't about throwing money at a problem. It's about targeting the right fits, players who can perform in Vic Fangio's scheme, or whatever hybrid the new defensive leadership settles on. It's about short-term impact, but also smart contracts that don't cripple future moves. And let's not forget, cornerback isn't the only need. The offensive line still lacks depth, especially at tackle. Injuries have been a consistent issue, and without stable protection, even a QB like Tua, with his quick release, becomes vulnerable. So the Dolphins must balance. Do you spend most of the cap space on rebuilding the secondary, or do you spread it out and also fortify the trenches? This is where the front office earns its paycheck, or at least it should. But with Greer at the helm, there's always the risk of conservative, delayed, or downright baffling decisions. That's why Dolphins fans are frustrated. That's why you see so many calling for a complete front office overhaul. Because this isn't just about Ramsay. It's about a pattern, a recurring cycle of high-risk acquisitions, poor development, and late corrections that leave Miami in a constant state of almost. Look, the Dolphins still have one of the most explosive offenses in the league. They still have Mike McDaniel, a creative and evolving mind who's shown he can scheme with the best of them. But none of that matters if the defense falls apart. You can't win shootouts every week. You can't keep pace with Kansas City, Baltimore, or even Buffalo if your secondary gets torched on every third down. So, here we are, waiting, watching, wondering if this team will finally make the right moves. Wondering if the Ramsay trade will unlock the resources Miami needs to make a legitimate push, or if it's just another missed opportunity in a franchise full of them. Now I want to hear from you. If the Dolphins do go through with the Ramsay trade and sign names like Douglas and Samuel Jr., do you think that's enough to keep the defense afloat? Or should Miami be going all in and bringing in even more veteran help, regardless of cost? Let's go Dolphins! The road to greatness is never easy, and sometimes the journey hits hard. But this is the Miami Dolphins we're talking about, a team with heart, history, and a fire that never dies. One rough patch doesn't define a season, and it certainly doesn't define this team. Champions are built not in comfort, but in adversity. Every setback is just a setup for a comeback, and right now, the Dolphins are gearing up for something big. The talent is there. The hunger is real. And the belief from players, coaches, and fans is stronger than ever. Don't lose faith. This team has the power to bounce back, to fight harder, and to prove every doubter wrong. The story isn't over. The next chapter is just beginning. Stay proud. Stay loud. Because the Miami Dolphins will rise again, and when they do, we'll all be there screaming "Go Dolphins" with every beat of our aqua and orange hearts.